So welcome to my class, and in this I'm going to talk about the law of supply. The law of supply simply means higher the price, higher the supply, other determinants remaining unchanged, ceteris paribus. That means the other determinants do not change while we are studying this. We are studying the law of supply. And then in this we are going to do the assumptions, and we'll talk about the schedule, the curve, and that's how we're going to explain the law of supply in detail. So have a look. So we start with the statement of the law of supply as you see it. We can see that. So yes, statement of the law says that other things being constant, quantity supplied of a commodity is directly related to the price of the commodity. That means when price of a commodity rises, supply also rises, and when price falls, supply also falls, provided other factors that determine supply remain unchanged. So the law of supply states the effect of a change in its own price of the commodity and supply. Thus, keeping all the determinants except price of the commodity constant, a positive relationship between price and supply is seen. So we see a direct, that is a positive relationship between price and quantity supplied. And remember the law of demand, it was inverse. Demand, quantity demanded, and price. You can, in fact, you must see the earlier chapter class in which I talked about the law of demand. It's very interesting. So you can juxtapose the two and study both of them. So in that you will notice that the demand curve is negatively sloped, and here the supply curve is positively sloped. So evidently we find that the producer or seller increases his supply at a higher price because thereby he earns larger profit. Okay. So we can first of all, before we illustrate it with the help of a schedule and a curve, let me talk about the assumptions. What are these assumptions as you see? So what we did was just take it as OTP again. So just so the phrase other things being constant, that is the assumption of law of supply. That means the law of supply is based on the assumption that all the other determinants of supply except own price of the commodity should remain constant, as we've just written. For example, you can talk about the objectives of the firm, then you can talk about the price of related goods or the price of inputs, then you can talk about technology of production should not change. That means, and another thing, taxation policy of the government should not change. So everything, all the determinants should be placed as they are. There should be no change whatsoever in this. So, and what is the basis of law of supply? One can just say that that means why supply is more at a higher price. The basis of law of supply or supply curve is the increasing marginal cost. That means as a result, the supply curve is upward sloping. The rising portion of MC curve is the supply curve itself. So if we haven't done, I will do that in another class. But in this, we are going to continue on with the law of supply. Now look at this. So this law of supply can be illustrated with the help of a supply schedule and a supply curve. So in the supply schedule, what do you notice? That as the price rises, the supply rises. So before we go on, I mean that you can see at various prices what is the supply, and when we represent it on a graph, we show the coordinates and we join them, and what we get is an upward sloping supply curve. Now what is a supply schedule? Let's just talk about that. It is a tabular statement showing different quantities of a commodity which a firm is ready to sell at different prices during a given period of time. That means it shows a relationship between the price of the commodity and its quantity which a firm is ready to sell. So and make a note of it that the change in quantity supplied is mainly due to change in the price of the commodity. Why? Because other factors other than price are assumed to be constant. So this is an imaginary supply schedule that has been given, that we and based on that we made a supply curve, plotted rather. You don't So plotted the supply curve based on this. Now what is a supply curve? It is a graphical representation of the relationship between the price of the commodity and quantity supplied. So it's a graphical representation of quantity supplied at different price levels. So we see as the price increases, the quantity supplied also increases. So the shape of the supply curve is positively sloped. So it rises, there's an upward moment when it is rising, and there is a downward moment when the price falls. So that is, we will be doing that in another section when we're going to talk about extension and expansion of supply. So with that, we're going to come to an end. In this, there'll be a question, explain the law of supply. Sometimes they ask only with the help of the table, that is with the help of a schedule, or sometimes only with the help of a graph. So based on that, you can do the answers. But remember, the statement has to be given, the assumptions have to be given, and at each price, what is the supply has to be explained.